So this is, you're saying, even during this time period where the nationalists and the Chinese were working together, the nationalists and the communists were working together, the Americans were also kind of on the side of the CCP.
Yeah. And here is another important thing, is that the Americans never understood the difference between totalitarianism and authoritarianism.
Right, as we talked about
Yeah,
at the
exactly.
beginning. Yeah.
Why? They never understood that Chiang Kai-shek government, the nationalist government, was indeed corrupt, was indeed ineffective, but it was an authoritarian regime. Because they thought that this government is so corrupt, and then look on the other side, look at communism. They seem to be real organized, devoted. They seem to be the one that we should collaborate with. And they have no understanding. Actually, they should by then, because there is an example of what went on in Soviet Union, but they refuse to really learn about it. And they bet that it is communism, communists that will really help to achieve the goal, to defeat the Japanese. So they did, just as I said, they made all the possible mistakes and eventually help the CCP to take over China.
But it seems like these mistakes basically continued for a very long time afterwards.
That
And it's
is
kind
the
of hard
key.
to imagine how that would be possible. I mean, you're saying this is like, the turn of the century, not too long after the turn of the century. We've just, and by the way, it's not just the U.S., it's kind of the West,
The West,
writ large,
yeah.
right? That we're really talking about
Yeah.
here. But with, of course, the U.S. being the most influential, but
That is the key. The lessons never learned. That's why the communist tactics of United Front keeps working.
what's the tactic?
Tactics is deception and influence and infiltration. So because of their tactic, the Americans, I'm talking about journalists, diplomats, American generals, American presidents, all bought into the lie that the Communist Party were really the one that is going to help to defeat the Japanese. They believe all the lies, even though the lies were just so blatant. But
Well, Japanese first and then later the Soviets, right?
Yeah.
Under many presidencies, right? Like there was this whole hedge to try to stop the Soviet Union with the help of the Chinese, which at this point, that relationship had soured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can give you some example of this started with the journalists. Always, like here too, the journalists. So they went to China before the Americans started to have make alliances with the nationalist government against Japan. One of them is called Edgar Snow. He is so well known, and because he wrote a book called Red Star Over China, and it's still in print today. He went to Yan'an, the base of the Chinese Communist Party, and he did a glowing report of the communists and compared them basically to the early Christians. They are organized, they're devoted, they are patriots, and they are the future. And of course, he has influence. He had direct influence to president like FDR, and later Nixon. So his book absolutely changed the perception of Chinese Communist Party in the West, and he called them reformers. They are agrarian reformers. It's not really communist. They are not really communists. That perception lingered until today. And it's not only it's influential internationally because it's in English. Later, it was translated into Chinese and use a different title because that title sounds a little bit like communist, propaganda. So changing into another title, it's The Journey to the West, using classic novels, Chinese classic novels title, and published. That was absolutely the most influential book to really get so many young people to Yan'an to join the revolution. And among them are two of my uncles. Yeah, they read the book. They believed it. They believed that to defeat Japanese, we have to join the communists. That is how powerful the propaganda is. Of course, Edgar Snow probably did not know that his book actually was propaganda because all the information he put on in his book was offered to him by the CCP. So in many ways, that is the first united front tactic that they implemented in the Americans, and he was the first. And then followed him, there are so many other journalists, and I mentioned many of them in the book. But later, the State Department, the diplomats, and the Christian educators, the missionary, the people that are really missionaries, they also knowingly or unknowingly, mostly unknowingly, help to spread the propaganda, and a lot of them just helped so many young people, just like here, just like in America today, to believe in communism and to abandon their families. So a lot of them were well-educated from well-to-do family, abandoned everything, went to Yan'an, joined the revolution.
Wow, that's amazing. So these became the old friends of the Chinese people, as you call them.
This is what the title, I would say, that is the title that the CCP gave to those foreigners who helped them with their cause. The old friend of the Chinese people. And the first one received this title is Edgar Snow. And then you will see along the line, many people, including our presidents, got that title. Good friend, old friend of Chinese people. It has nothing to do with Chinese people. It should be called old friend of the CCP or useful idiots.
And this also reminds me of the, one of these biggest pieces of successful propaganda, I think, that the Chinese Communist Party has effected is just this idea that the communists actually represent the Chinese people, that the party is the people.
Yeah.
In fact, right? When I would argue nothing could be further from the truth.
That lie is still being believed by so many Americans or people around the world. Even today.
Even Chinese, many.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
I mean, that's the craziest part, right?
Yeah. So I would not too long ago, and this guy called Victor Gao, he worked for some kind of a think tank in Beijing. So he had a video that went viral. He said, China, we have 5,000 years history, most of which there's no United States. And we are expected to survive another 5,000 years. This is a lie. Chinese civilization lasted for thousands of years, but the CCP is not part of the Chinese civilization. It's an imported Western ideology, and they had a beginning. That was 1921. That is CCP, and they hijacked China. Now they call themselves China. It cannot be further from the truth. So this is very important for Americans to understand this. CCP is absolutely a foreign implant in China, and I would say they were the colonizers of this ideology from Western Europe, from Germany, if we trace back to the beginning, and it has nothing to do with Chinese civilization. And during the Cultural Revolution, we saw that Mao wanted to destroy everything that's Chinese through the so-called 4 O's, destroy the 4 O's, old ideas, old tradition, old custom, and old habits. Anything Chinese they want to destroy, they are not Chinese. CCP is not Chinese. I think it's so important for people to understand this.
Why are communists always so interested in destroying what Mao called the 4 Olds, all of this tradition?
Yeah, we talk a little bit, and I really consider communism a theocracy. It's a religion, and it's absolutely a religion because it sought to control not just a system, not just property or economy. It really want to control people's mind. And so in many ways, it is a religion. So because it is a religion, it cannot put up with any other tradition, civilization, ideology, and of course, religion.
But with the coming of Deng Xiaoping, as the story goes, right, suddenly to be rich is to be glorious. So, you know, obviously China abandoned communism, right?
Well, then we have to go back a little bit to Nixon, don't you think? And so it was 1972, and I was in high school that we learned Nixon was coming to China. We just could not believe. If Americans were shocked, we were, just imagine how shocked we were, because since childhood we're taught America is our deadly enemy, because America want to destroy us, and so we'll do everything to defend China against our enemy. And then you tell me President Nixon was going to visit us, and we just could not get our mind around it. And that was the height of the Cultural Revolution, when everything was in ruins, absolutely in ruins, and there's no economy. And a few years after that, I was sent to the countryside after I graduated from high school. Why? There's no economy, no jobs, no nothing. We live in extreme poverty. But CCP was saved by no other than the President of the United States, Richard Nixon. And Trump rightly called that was the biggest mistake he made. Yes, that is true. He saved CCP. He saved the CCP from the ruins.
Mm-hmm. How?
He opened China up. And at that time, it's even worse than just economic ruins in America. In the late 50s.
In China.
In China. The time was just so crucial because China at that time was facing the absolute total collapse internally. There's no economy. There's just everyone was living in extreme poverty. And but more than that. And in the late 1950s, there was a big split between China and Soviet Union. And it get worse. By the time of 1972, by the time that before Nixon visited China, the two powers were almost at the blink of nuclear war. Can you imagine? Mao was like a threatened both internally, externally. Only this time it was his former boss, Soviet Union. And he needed help. He absolutely needed help. Sure enough, the help was on the way. And that was no other than the President of the United States, Richard Nixon.
So it opened up.
Opened it up. And all the crisis eased. And soon after that, and China got into the Security Council of United Nations because the Americans did not do anything about it. So turned around and then absolutely was saved and escaped all the immediate threat of being bombed by a nuclear weapon, and now safely on the side of the Americas, of the world superpower, United States of America.
You know, it's a really, this story, and I want to encourage people to read because you flesh out so many of these details and nuances of how this all happened. But we go from this opening up where the Nixon administration, in effect, you know, kind of saves the CCP as opposed to having it collapse and something else forming there. Two, you know, there's this kind of line that goes all the way to today where the CCP has these deep, deep inroads in America itself. We're seeing another biolab that's been discovered. We have these, you know, police stations, as we say in quotes. We have, you know, all of this IP theft and, you know, cyber theft, and I mean, and United Front, you know, compromised individuals across the whole country. And I mean, it's not just America, but of course the focus always has been America. So, you know, just I would love to talk out through all the nuance, and that's something I think people should read your book through it. But just kind of give me a picture of how we went from the Nixon's opening up to today.
Yeah, I think this. You're so right. There's so much to cover, and it's almost impossible. But I try my best. So after Nixon opened the door to China, and a lot of people have problems understanding it. And just like me, I was like, what? But then, of course, I could not think critically. The party must be right. So, yeah, so party was right. But a lot of Americans have trouble understanding it. We're still in the midst of Cold War. So if we ally with the Chinese, which was communist country, and so then is the Cold War about communism? And so people have questions. So it just makes no sense, right? And so what they did, the Nixon administration, they come up with a way that somehow worked. They said, yes, the enemy is still communism, but the Chinese communists, they're not really communists. They are so-called communists, and that has been actually the way that they deceive Americans, and still worked. Still today, people think that Chinese communism, it's kind of like Confucius communism. It's not like you know, the Soviet communism. It's still today Russia, and not many people call China. So they were allowed to not be questioned. All this the atrocity happened behind the so-called bamboo curtain, was not taught. 80-some million Chinese died under the Chinese regime, and later more than 300 million babies were forcibly boarded. Not told. So the American people just okay, Chinese communists, they're not really a threat. They're okay, and so that is really a problem. And so later on, they call it, they're reformers. Remember Deng Xiaoping, the reformer. Deng Xiaoping never planned to have political reform. All he wanted was economic reform. Why? Because China was absolutely in the brink of total collapse. At that time, nobody believed in CCP, and so he has to do something. So that's why he got his doctrine, now kind of famous, black cat, white cat. As long as it catches mouse, it's a good cat. It's temporarily. We have to save this country, and what do we do? Is get the foreign investment, get their technology, and that's how we started. And Americans were told, you know, if we help China, first of all, it's not a real communist; it's a so-called communist country. If we help them to develop their economy, democracy will just naturally follow. Do we remember that? And I have to say, I even kind of believe maybe if we help them to have a strong economy, people will naturally demand more freedom of speech, and they will have a democracy in China. Wrong, because again, we're dealing with communists. And after all these decades of opening and a reform, what happened when Xi Jinping took over in 2012? Reverse. Now going back to Mao era, because to them, wealth is important, but nothing is more important than the control of power.
Mm-hmm. Than the party.
And the
keeping
party.
The party.
Absolutely, because power and party is the same thing. To save the party is more important than anything else. And this is something else I think it's important that I want to bring up, is the rise of China. Now it's become the second largest economy. Who benefits? Okay, we'll say, okay, Americans, we sacrificed. We lost millions of jobs. Maybe by doing so, we help the Chinese people to have a better future. No, that is not the case. We help the CCP elite to become rich. Even today, I think 600 million Chinese only makes $5 a day. Why? Because that's not what the CCP doing all this for. It's for their power. So the CCP elites become billionaires, some even trillionaires. So the rise of China is bad for America, bad for the world, because they become really a threat. A regional threat, now a world threat. They are, we can see their hands behind almost all the terrorist organization, and also in America, we can almost see their hands behind all these radical organizations, behind BMM and behind the protests for Hamas, and today, and anti-ICE. And there's people reporting the connection of their money coming to fund those radical organizations. So, but most of all, I think it is the Chinese people who are the victims of this powerful party. And before I said, after the Chinese Cultural Revolution, they really lost all their legitimacy. People did not believe in the CCP. Not only that the CCP was, and the whole country was in economic ruins, but also people just lost faith in the Communist Party. But today, they absolutely have more power than ever. And so the democracy in China is further away from the horizon than ever. So the victims absolutely are the Chinese people.
I just came back from the International Religious Freedom Summit, which was here in DC, as we're filming, the last couple of days. And I keep thinking about this, that religious freedom really is the litmus test. Because as you said, right, in these communist societies, it is this kind of quasi-false religion character that communism takes on. And so, of course, they have to suppress any other form of anything that would compete with that, because people, I believe that people naturally want to seek that connection, an actual connection to God, not with the Communist Party, ideology or as an intermediary. And so it can never tolerate the religious freedom. And if we understood this and saw that and understood that this is the red flag, right?
Absolutely.
We would be in a very different situation, right?
Yeah. And the other thing I can say is that during the Cultural Revolution, and they depend on people reporting each other. And I just absolutely remember that we're encouraged to report even our parents. If we hear they say something that is not politically correct, or is that somehow against the party's party line. And they don't have to do that today. with this surveillance technology, they can absolutely control you before you even utter a word. And with the social credit system, they absolutely enslave every Chinese. And if you want to, if they suspect you, it's not even you want to do something against the government. If they suspect that you might have something against the government, they can absolutely end your life. They can use the app. They can just, you can have access to your bank account. You can even take a train or plane, or you're just basically, you are just disabled. And so that was not like Cultural Revolution anymore, because now they have the technology, they have the money, thanks to the West and thanks specifically to the United States. Now they become more powerful than ever and more dangerous than ever.
I mean, it's interesting because they're more powerful. They have a lot of power, and they are dangerous. I think I agree with that. At the same time, they're in some ways they're very fragile.
Yeah. And you can see that just in the past 2 weeks, the news came out of China that Xi Jinping purged the #1 in the military and a bunch of high-level military leaders. And this is not his first, but this is his biggest. And this guy was his childhood friend. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Why? Because he feel not secure. So because of that, he has to purge everyone that he feel like he's suspicious of. But eventually, he won't trust anyone. There's no one left to trust. And how fragile is that kind of regime? Yes, while from the outside look very powerful, but inside it's very fragile. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so I mean, because it's kind of like a mixed message, right? Because on the one hand, you're saying, yes, there's a lot of power. I mean, yes, they have nuclear weapons, they had TikTok, they have, all of this, biggest militarization in the history of the world, fastest, arguably, massive state security apparatus to repress the people of the country. At the same time, it's just always, I mean, some people would argue, and I think I would be one of them, that it's unusually fragile.
Yeah.
And I had Hung He, one of our kind of key
Yes, yeah. I
analysts,
saw
right,
that
explaining
interview, yeah.
how, in order to achieve what she achieved through these purges of the top military leaders, in a way, he's sort of reduced the overall power of the system because you started breaking all of the unwritten rules that of how that system worked.
Yeah, the other thing I think a lot of Americans don't understand. Who do you think is the #1 threat to the CCP? Most people probably say United States, because it is the superpower that CCP want to replace. And of course, it consider United States as #1 enemy. It's kind of true, but there is another enemy it's scared the most. It's the Chinese people. It spend more money than the military and on this called security or public safety. It is really all this surveillance systems and all this police and to do what? To control the population, because they are scared of the people that they rule over.
So I'm really enjoying this conversation. I would love to actually continue it for hours, but I think we'll let people read your book and kind of figure out a lot of these details. Again, we looked at a situation where on the one hand we do feel like the CCP has an unusual level of power, military, unusual level of influence in the West, in America. I mean, we can see variations of it all the time. They've really taken advantage of the openness of our system in the West. At the same time, there's this fragility inherent because there isn't that the legitimacy, and there's this, sort of paranoia, right, that to keep power at any cost. What do you see as the right approach, right, that would be, good for America, good for the Chinese people going forward?
Yeah, it's a big question, but one thing I would say is that the theme or the goal of my book is to really to tell American people we have threat absolutely over there. That's CCP, and also my first book I addressed the threat within. That is the American Cultural Revolution, the woke ideology, and but where is the real source of all this problem? Are they even connected? And how do I address it? And it's a big question, but I would say that my first book, Mao's America, I try to answer the question to the threat from within. And that is the woke ideology, and that is not coming from somewhere else. It's homeborn. Woke ideology was born here and made specifically for a country like America. And so, but after that, I still feel like there's a lot of questions unanswered. But also I want to make this very clear in my second book, Made in America. And as the title said, I believe that the reason that CCP, first of all, was successful in taking over China and later in challenge directly to America is because we, as Americans, we fail to, especially our leaders, fail to understand the true nature of communism. And we fail to understand the threat it poses to us, to our way of life. And because of that, we made one mistake of another, and history was never learned. And that's why, the problem is here. We have to look inside rather than look outside to have solutions. And this is a huge problem, but I say start with learning history. Start to learn how we got here to begin with. And I think this book will help you really to understand a lot of things that you are not taught, because this is, I call it hidden history, because it's not taught in schools, and it's not taught and discussed in public discourse, because a lot of people want to hide it. But in order for us to understand, we have to learn this very, very important piece of history, and that my book is all about.
And you mentioned that we really failed to understand the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party, of Chinese communism. I think this is of critical importance. I actually make the same argument. In a nutshell, how would you explain that nature in the shortest possible way? What is it that we don't understand?
Okay, yeah. One way is to understand that communism, we talk a little bit, it's a religion. And it's really want to remake the world in its own image. And not only that, it want to remake human nature. And so it cannot be peaceful, because in order to do that, they have to use power and they have to use violence. And this is not what I'm saying. Okay, I think that's what they are. I lived through it. And history is there for us to learn. It happened in Soviet Union, happened to Poland, where your family is from. It happened to China, happened in Cuba. What do? We have to learn history. The other thing I have to say, nowadays, a lot of people talk about the globalism. And I have to say, communism is globalism. In its DNA, it wants not just change human nature, it wants to take over the world. When I was growing up, we were always told our goal is to liberate the humanity. So its goal is not just China and then maybe some other country. No, the entire world. That is the threat. You can treat it as friend, but it always treats you as its mortal enemy. And I did use this story in the book, The Farmer and the Snake. A lot of people probably know that story. CCP or communism is a snake. You can save it, you can help it, but it will bite you because it's nature. The nature is that it's going to destroy you.
Well, Shi Van Fleet, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you so much, as usual.
Thank you all for joining Shi Van Fleet and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.